how do I know what God made me for? Remember when God says to Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you and appointed you to be a prophet to the nations. In other words, before Jeremiah was born, God knew what Jeremiah was going to do. He knew what he would be set apart to accomplish. And he was calling on him at that point to do that very thing. And so one of the things to remember is God knows the beginning from the end. He knows everything. He's outside of time and space, so he knows all the days of your life. That is different than saying that he causes all the things to happen in your life, because there's all kinds of other forces other than God. Now, God's sovereign over the big picture, but there are bad people and bad things, evil spirits, situations, a broken world, all these things that contribute to things that happen in our life. And God doesn't cause all those things. But here's what we do know. Romans 8:28, as we all know, God causes all things to work together for the good of all people. Right? Wrong. God causes all things that happen to work together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. So what does that mean? What's the promise? If you love him, if you love him, if you're called according to his purpose, then you can be sure that God is causing all the things that happen in your life to work together for something to accomplish the plan that he created you to do. If you don't love him, or if there's at some point where you're not loving him, then it's possible that you're going to mess some things up and you're not going to accomplish the plan. So what is important then is that we love him. What's the greatest command? Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. Why is that the greatest command? Because if we do that, we find out that life works. And if we don't do that, we find out that life doesn't work. So how do you know what God's will is for your future? How do you know what he's calling you to do, what he created you to do? Well, you start by loving him. God, I love you. And none of us loves him as much as we should. So what do? We say, God, teach me to love you more. Help me to love you more. And if that's the cry of our heart, then we know that God's going to, as it says there in Romans 8:28, he's going to cause all the things that have happened to work together for your good. Now, speaking directly to Utah, here's what I know. His life has been directed by God even before he knew who God was. And here's how it happened. Let me just tell you, let me remind you of the story, Utah, and I'll tell the rest of you what his story was. That in 2009, spring of 2009, I was walking across the parking lot at the church and ran into a kid named John. Shaggy hair. John, he could hardly see him because of his hair hanging over his eyes, but I knew he loved Jesus. And so I said, hey, John, what you doing this summer? And he said, I don't know. And I said, well, you want to go to Japan with me? And he said, sure. I said, do you love Jesus? He said, yeah. So I said, come to Japan. So we got back from Japan and we had a bunch of Japanese students then at my house one day. And John shows up. And that day, just like often happens at my house, John fell in love with a young woman named Naoko. She had a nephew named Utah, the Utah that I've been talking about. And because of that encounter that I'd had with John, and because he happened to be at my house that day when those people were there, his wife later had a nephew who came to America, came and moved into our discipleship housing, and came to know Jesus. And the story went on. Utah was at UTA for several years, then went to Christ for the Nations, now is headed back to Japan. Okay, the reason I'm telling you this story is because there's no way in the world that Utah could have known that plan. All he did was do the next thing that made sense to him, and God was guiding his life, and God brought him to our ministry and to UTA and to Christ for the Nations and to our discipleship house, and now Utah follows Jesus. He couldn't have planned that. Now Utah's a believer. But let me ask you this. What does Utah should do? What should he do now? What's the next step? Well, you do the next right thing, the next thing that you know that God is telling you to do. So how do you know what that is? Well, let me give you some verses. First of all, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. What does it say? Trust in the Lord with all your heart How much of your heart? All your heart. Not 90%. You trust in the Lord with all your heart, and you lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, there's that word all again. You acknowledge him. And the promise is he'll make your path straight. He'll direct your paths. He'll work out the details of your life if you will follow him. You don't have to know the plan. He knows the plan. You just got to follow him. And I know what we want is we want God to give us the 20-year plan. You're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. That's not the way it works. He hands you a blank contract and says, sign it. And you say, God, I can't sign this. I haven't read the fine print yet. He says, I'll fill it out later. You just sign it. That takes a lot of trust. But that's what our lives are like. That's what success is. We got to come to him and say, God, anything you want, I'm here to do. You just direct me. You lead me. I'll follow you. And he leads every step. That's the promise. Also, seek first his kingdom. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and then all these things will be added to you. You want to know what you're supposed to do? You seek first his kingdom. You seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. In other words, God, what I want is I want to build your kingdom in my life, and I want to build your kingdom through my life and the world around me. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm doing today. Today in all my conversations, what I'm doing is I'm not trying to protect myself. I'm not trying to build a kingdom for myself. I'm giving my life to you, seeking your righteousness, not my own righteousness, seeking your righteousness. And the promise there is that you get everything that you need. And yet we still sit back and think, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, James 1:3. James 1:3, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to him. Guaranteed. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt. Because anyone who doubts is like the wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. Such a man should not think he'll receive anything from the Lord. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all he does. Now think about what this means. First of all, there's the promise. The promise that if you ask, if you need wisdom, you ask God, God, give me wisdom. I've got this situation. I need to decide whether to pursue this girl or pursue this job or stop this job and go to school over here. And I need your wisdom. And when you ask, James says, you must believe and not doubt. What are you supposed to believe? You believe that what you ask for will be given to you. And then as you make your decisions based on the wisdom that you have, you say, okay, I asked for wisdom. Now I follow this out. I follow the wisdom that I know. And I know it's from God because I asked and I didn't doubt. Now, what's very important is that you don't lean on your own understanding. So you have to combine this with the verses that we just mentioned. So you're not just using your own human wisdom, but as you say, God, I asked you for wisdom, and it makes sense for me to take this job here in Miaken or wherever it is. You don't have to second guess yourself. That's what that second part is all about. He who doubts is like the wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. In other words, you guys know what that's like, where you make a decision and you keep on second guessing yourself. Like, nah, I don't think that was right. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Stop doing that. That's a lack of faith. You say, I know that God promises to lead my life. He's leading my life. Psalm 32:8-9. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you and I will watch over you. That's God's promise. So we have that confidence that he's going to guide us. And now we ask for wisdom and we say, okay, it makes sense to me based on my eyes on Jesus. It makes sense for me to take this job. Take the job. You start the ministry. You quit that ministry. You stop going to that church. You make these decisions based on the wisdom that you ask God for, and you find out that he's leading you. Now, that takes a lot of faith when you are young because you can't see the future. But by the time you get to my age, as I look back over 40 years, I think my life is like a miracle. How did I make all the right decisions? Now, obviously, I made wrong decisions, but my life worked anyway. I mean, look where I'm at. How did I become a pastor here? How did I get one of the coolest jobs in the world? How did I get to do all this stuff in different countries, telling people about Jesus? It was a dream in my heart, but there is no way I could have planned well enough or connected with the right people well enough to make it all happen. It just happened. Why? Because I wasn't seeking the success. I was seeking him. And I told the Lord when I came to America back when I was 18 years old, really when I was a year later, when I was 19 years old and living off of Hollywood Boulevard with a bunch of guys in what we called the rat's nest. I slept behind a cardboard box in the corner so I wouldn't have to see the things that were going on in our apartment every night. And it seemed like it would be impossible for my life to ever work. It seemed like nobody around me cared about anything that was right or true or holy or pure. And so at that point, I thought, Lord, my life is a mess. I don't have any friends. I don't have any job. I don't have any money. I don't have any car. I was this far from being homeless. Lord, I can't make my life work, but I am going to do what Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says and trust you with all my heart. I'll give my life to you. I'll do whatever you want. And I'm not going to try to provide for myself. And my life has been like a dream, but I'll tell you about that in the next episode. God, here I am, send me.